at the Surrey Business School. I'm also part of a research center called Center for the Digital Economy. And it's my pleasure to be chairing this panel with great people doing great things in the field. We know that artificial intelligence has a lot of potentialities. It's certainly a keyword these days. And certainly, even when there are immense opportunities, we're also concerned about the risk and the potential limitations and harms that this may create to all societies, but especially in the global south. So in this panel, we want to, share current, projects, actual projects by practitioners in the field in different parts of Latin America, from Brazil to Mexico to Argentina, to actually problematize this, how in what conditions and under what terms artificial intelligence can actually help us to promote social inclusion and benefit from public good, and to what extent this is a challenge, right? So I'd like to introduce the speakers of this panel first. And the format is that they will present the different projects they've been working on in the region for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll open up for a conversation. I'll lead some of those questions, but this is very, a participatory this time. So we're really hoping that you'll have lots of questions for them. So first, I would like to introduce Renata Avila, who's an international human rights lawyer and digital rights advocate. Currently, Renata is the CEO of the Open Knowledge Foundation that many of you might be familiar. She has successfully built a global network of networks advancing decolonial, people-centric approach to open technologies and knowledge. These are very important keywords for this community, Renata. So really, really grateful to have you here. Renata will speak about the capacities that are needed to really benefit from this AI, from a project she's been leading in conjunction with UNESCO, right? So I'll give you the word in a minute. So we'll start with Renata. Then it's Fabrizio Scrolini, who is the executive director of ILDA, the Open Data Latin American Initiative. When I say it wrong, I think it's the Latin American Initiative for Open Data. I think the translation hit me. And Fabrizio has co-founded AbreLatam and an Open Data Regional Conference, and it's been leading lots of efforts. I'm also part of ILDA as a senior associate researcher there. He has a long-standing career of working with governments in different aspects of digital innovation, but certainly in the open data space. And he will tell us the lessons learned about a series of projects financed with the support of IDRC and other institutions that try to implement AI in different parts of important government-centric services. And then we have also Pablo Ilaire, who is also a lawyer, is specialized in criminal law, currently doing a master's at the London School of Economics, and also part of the criminal court number 10 in the city of Buenos Aires. Pablo has, it's been working for many, many years in this sector, and also leading very interesting projects on open justice. And he will tell us lots of details of the process in one of the projects that was funded by this grant Empatia that Fabrizio will tell us about. And he's going to walk us through how this was happening, how this was possible, what are the current barriers, and what are the benefits of this technology for justice, and also what are the current challenges. So with this preamble, I will shut myself now, and over to you, Renata. So the floor is yours, and please feel free to put questions as we go on the chat. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, I'm trying to find the correct slides. 1 second, please. Apologies.
No problem.
And now I have the correct slides. So this is a very, very, very exciting project, and it's a collective effort. Of course, it is not only me, it's not only Open Knowledge Foundation doing it. And it is I think it's the challenge of our times, and it's something that civil society and academia should rally behind. It is when we deal with AI, when we deal with sophisticated technologies and we want to implement changes, the main problem that we have is the other side, the public sector, and the huge, like knowledge gaps, uh, state capture, privatization of everything, like a lot of difficulties that impede us have a proper conversation with the government to co-create the basically institutions of the future. So UNESCO is aiming at creating a very basic but very targeted curricula to define the way civil servants will be like formed, which competencies, which skills, which abilities should they have, in especially in the global south. I know that it sounds a little bit managerial, and every time that we hear about the skills and capacity building and so on, sounds like a McKinsey, but that's not at all what we are trying to do. What we are trying to do, first, these are the organizations involved. It is to have like really a comprehensive, even if it's just a short list, a comprehensive list of skills that each and every civil servant should have when an institution is going through digital transformation, and especially, to prepare them, to future-proof them for the challenges that AI will entail. So what we are doing is, that was already done in Africa, in Africa they went and asked everybody, what do you want to know? Which skills are missing for you to understand and seize the power of AI in the public interest? Of course, many of the responses were like, we don't even know what AI is, or we just want to buy a system and plug and play, And but many of the knowledge gaps are also like, where do I buy it? How do I evaluate that the things that I'm buying are adequate? How can I know if locally I can produce these technologies of the future? But what about privacy? But what about rights? So these were like, some of the findings in Africa, and I think that the situation is similar in Latin America. Policy, setting standards, how to do partnerships, and so on, like the requests coming from the governments. I think that is very interesting because we often work with academia alone and with civil society alone. And we do not understand that ultimately what we want to transform is the public sector, and we do not stop and listen to their needs. So this project is trying to do precisely that. We are trying through a consultative process and a research process to validate a framework that will be adequate for the needs of civil servants over the next 25 years, and hopefully shape the curricula of different governments on how a civil servant is trained to know at least the minimums on ethics, on human rights, on how technology is built, data literacy, and so on, but also always being context sensitive and adaptable to the local realities. So which specific capacities, for example, civil servants will need, or academia and civil society indicates that civil servants should have in our region? Is it data literacy? Is it privacy? Is cybersecurity? Is different attitudes, not to be like, the typical bureaucrat that says that the computer said no. So we are asking all these questions to many of them, and trying to figure out, identify needs identify good practices and good cases. So if you have a good case, it would be like absolutely fantastic that you share it. And also identify horror stories when, you know, like an entire unit was pushed into like a completely useless capacity building process that lead to nowhere because it was not context sensitive. So this final report will be published 28th of September, and hopefully will lead to, you know, transformative changes in the public sector with political will.
Thanks, Renata. This is really, really, well, of course, very much needed and also very welcome. Can you tell us just a bit more? Yes.
Yes, one thing is think about that, like the list of skills, the list of competencies is, it would be like, imagine your dream person on the other side in the public sector. Maybe you know someone like that, someone who gets it, someone who understands it, someone who understands it not from a corporate perspective but a public interest perspective. If you can describe that person, if you can, like, you know, like point at persons already working at the public administration and doing amazing things, I think that that would be like the moment to look at them and look at examples and look at the work. In terms of AI in Latin America, I was reading, you know, like an article. We do not need to wait for the AI to arrive. We need to have the people prepared now and aware now. So when it arrives, all the frameworks, all the safeguards are in place. But for that, you know, we need basic data literacy to start with, basic rights literacy to start with, and listen to people and listen to what they are curious about, what they ignore, what they believe also, because many of them believe that, you know, like deployment of AI is going to end with the jobs. We need to debunk myths and build better like critical thinking inside the public sector. And academia and civil society play an incredible role in that.
So is that a way people can engage in this project or so just share the consultation? That would be really great. Something that is, and please, if you have questions for Renata, I know Renata has to go soon, especially because you hear a lot of noises in another, you know, big meeting room in Brussels. That's awesome. If we can put it in the chat if you can later. The thing is, sometimes, you know, you don't know what you don't know, right? So when we're asking, okay, what are these set of skills? So how are you dealing with that part and informing, you know, precisely, okay, what is it that they really need?
And I think that what will be very interesting and hopefully we could do, you know, is to there will be a couple of consultations that are targeting knowledge communities, you know, academia and training academies. And I will really, it will happen in the second half of June. And I would love all of you to participate, you know, like I think that, of course, it's not for us, but we all had interacted, you know, like with, I mean, or should have interacted at some point with a public officer. And I think that we can shape this, you know, like it's like planting the seed of the people we want to deal with in 10 years' time. It's planting the seed of a system where we, like, you know, interoperable system of people, because all the time we are thinking and thinking of interoperability of things, of standards, of technology, of data. And we don't have the interoperable system of people who speak, when they speak AI, they know the terms and they know that they're referring to the same, or ethics or so on. And for artificial intelligence, having a common, a basic, a ground understanding on the issue is incredibly important and urgent. And it has to be, like, you know, shaped from a global South perspective. And that's precisely what we are trying to push with UNESCO. But we cannot dictate it. We cannot sit down. I mean, Fabrizio is involved, others are involved. We cannot sit down and write it. We need to hear from people and get the input from people in a very collaborative and democratic way, so as make sure that it reflects the real needs and not our assumptions, basically.
That's great. So I think at least at the IFIP, there is a very, you know, engaged and interested community that would definitely, you know, perhaps can augmentate this to reach out for more people. Are there any questions for Renata from the audience? Just something that you would like to shoot quickly now. otherwise, we can now move to Fabricio. And of course, if you have further questions, I would love to follow up on some of the things you said, and we'll see if you're still there. But thanks a lot, Renata. And this has been, yeah, really, really well. I think it's something we need, right? Especially when this AI becomes such a catchword culture with certain interests and not very inclusive, I would say. So I think yours is an example of a project that is really trying to build inclusion, and that for that people need to engage. And I think it's one of the big challenges that we have many times, especially in the global south. Great, thanks. The link is there for you to access it. Fabricio, I'd like you to come next, and so explain the great work done on empathia and yeah, and some of the lessons that you've been able to collect so far.
Sure. Thank you very much, Carla, and thank you very much, Renata, for your presentation. Let me see if you are able to see now my screen, hopefully. And so this is what we are going to talk today is about AI policies in LATAM. And this is actually connected with our work on Empatia, which is a program that Carla was mentioning before, supported by the International Development Research Center, IDRC, and IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank. And Empatia, just to give you a brief outlook, aim to do three things. So the idea was to understand a bit more about the current regulatory framework of AI in Latin America. And by understand, it means not only mapping the existing regulation, but also informing that regulation with evidence-based projects, which were part of the call Empatia launch a couple of, last year actually, almost 2 years ago, to explore different uses of artificial intelligence, or more properly speaking, machine learning in the public sector, or machine learning to solve public problems. At the end of the day, that was the aim of the call. I think Carla and other colleagues were involved in selecting those projects. And then the third thing that Empatia wanted to do, and is currently doing, is to build capacities, particularly in the public service or in the civil service, to deal with this new machine learning AI phenomena in the public sector. And we have a stellar group of teachers that are currently delivering an online course in Latin America. We partner with our colleagues at the e-government agency in Uruguay to deliver a Latin American course on this. And also, we are partnering with the Open Knowledge Foundation, as you heard from Renata, to keep exploring this issue of the right capacities. So this presentation, this is something we elaborated with my colleague, Maria Esther Cervantes, who apologized for not being here. She's actually on a plane at the moment, so she couldn't make it. So what we were looking at, basically, were at AI strategies, AI policies, in Latin America. And if we were to define what we mean by that, we were looking for clear objectives, sound policy design, implementation processes or plans, and evaluation criteria to understand the impact of AI/machine learning in government, society, and the private sector. So that's what we set out to look, basically, to understand if that was available in Latin America. And what we found was that, that very, let's say, ideal type definition of how this should look like was not there. We found that some countries had digital government strategies, which are very popular in this region. They're called the digital agendas and so on. And there were some specific measures around AI or machine learning connected to these strategies. They were mostly about chatbots, to be fair. They all wanted a chatbot. Then the other thing that we found in some countries were roadmaps, and these were more lax, more open-ended, but with a bit more level of sophistication about what they expected of artificial intelligence and beyond in the public sector. We also found isolated measures, particularly in federal states without central coordination. That's something we found a lot. And in some few countries, we actually found sort of coordinated strategies of AI. But these were only 2 countries in Latin America at the state of where we did this research. This change a bit in the last year. Whether the level of ambition of these tools that depends on how you look at it. So that's sort of the how does it look like. And at the moment, the countries that actually have AI strategies, I think that there is room to be more transparent, inclusive, and accountable in terms of how they are developing it. And this is something that these processes were, in some cases, they were amidst the pandemic, so that obviously, was not the ideal moment to develop some of these processes. In some cases, it was done before the pandemic, but without sufficient consultation to other groups. And then countries without specific strategies, could learn basically of processes that actually took place in Chile, Brazil, Argentina, and the criticism that these processes face, particularly in terms of openness and inclusion. In some of these countries, these processes were highly technical, I will say, and that obviously prevented other views of society, other views about the use of machine learning to be included in the way these strategies develop. But in any case, do not worry, because the low level of institutionalization of most of these policies and strategies actually makes them not sustainable in the long run, and are very much affected by changes of government. So at the end of the day, there's limited capacity in Latin America to sustain these strategies in the long run. And that's part of the problem, the whole digital agenda phase in the continent, AI being just one of them. What I wanted to share with you here is like part of what so in this context, basically, which is, at the moment, it's not a bleak picture, it's just the way it is. I want to share with you a few of the projects we selected in Empatia and some of the lessons we learned applying them. So for instance, the case of Querido Diario, which essentially provided access to open data from the gazettes at the local level in the Brazilian case, and allow for monitoring public spending among other things. It's a good case of how this project actually gained traction in several cities of Brazil, and is currently being supported by the community. They crowdfunded the project beyond our initial support, and it keeps going, providing support for more fiscal transparency there, and is inserted in an ecosystem of apps and players. And I think that's a good example of how these projects can evolve in a participatory manner. Or, for instance, the case of Prosperia, which was mostly about the use of databases to detect chronic illnesses. And these databases, the funny part is that when you try to do that online at the moment, most of the time, what you are going to do is to use databases that come from an American institution, or if you're like an European institutions. So most of this data is generally reliable, but sometimes not accurate, not adequate for the local population. So what these colleagues in Mexico did were actually to use the Mexican database they had available, and to actually set up the parameters according to the Mexican population. At the moment, we are also collaborating with the Uruguayan government to detect water leaks around the countryside in Uruguay in order to improve the management of water, particularly because Uruguay is a country that has a lot of agro-industry around, and obviously there's a lot of an intense use of the land, which could not be sustainable, and the government does not have the capacity to fully police the whole territory, right? So these kind of tools, using satellite imagery from the Uruguayan government, allows them, or could potentially allow them, to improve their the way they operate. So as you can see, most of these are public issues with different degrees of cooperation, right? In the Uruguayan case, we are working alongside government in full cooperation. In our college of Prosperia was mostly about the use of data already available, developing algorithms on their own and set up the tools on their own. And in Querido Diario, it was a bit of participation and a bit of cooperation with the public sector, trying to turn this potentially into a product. I mean, none of them and none of the other projects, which, we have also projects as well, monitoring public procurement. We have other projects in the judiciary, and Pablo will probably tell us more about that. So none of these projects are requiring extreme versions of algorithms or sophisticated, neural language and whatever. I mean, like, it's not the case. Most of the stuff what we're looking at are very basic uses of machine learning that are most of the time automating processes and partnering with the human element in the administration or with the human element in the civil society to augment or to increase their capacities, or in some cases to eventually allowing them to perform their functions. So what we are learning from that, there are many lessons, but let me give you just three. I mean, one is about capacities and costs. I mean, it is always more expensive of what it looked like. That will be like my first advice. And the second is that there is a role for co-production of these services. Like the idea that you can co-develop this between government and society, between government and the private sector. I mean, that's feasible. I mean, we have seen cases, and most of the cases in Empatia have gone this way. But to do that, there's a second element, and co-production of services, co-production of tools is not that common across the world, but it's something that brings more value, particularly because you are bringing in the potential, the people that are actually interested in the product on board, right? So that creates, also gives room to some technical transfer from private sector, from civil society to governments. And that's also important. The second element is that the success of these projects highly depends on champions or inside the administration, and also on the management skills they have in order to succeed. And not only about the technical management skills, which are important to understand, how data is structured, to understand how data is processed, to understand how algorithms and machine learning works, but also about the management skills of these kind of projects, which usually tend to iterate quite a lot. And finally, there is an issue around data infrastructure. Most of these projects, if not all, had to invest a lot in data, in actually putting the data in the right setting, in the right quality. So yes, I mean, like, data remains very important in order for these beautiful algorithms to work. And this is something that we have been preaching to the AI community, who tends to think that just by releasing a data set, or just by just give me the data and my unsupervised learning algorithm will deal with that. Well, good luck with that. I mean, like, it's just not going to work, right? At least not in the setting that we are expecting this to work, or for the functions we expect this to work. Naturally, if this is about writing texts, or which are incredible achievements in its own, or you want to write letters like Shakespeare, that's more feasible. Depending on how you feed the algorithms, it will deliver value. Unfortunately, Latin American governments have three problems in terms of data infrastructure. A, it's about data itself. I mean, the data sometimes is not there. B, and this is shared with other governments as well, not only in Latin America, but globally, there's an enormous amount of bias in the way we collect data because of our colonial history. And as a result, we have a lot of underrepresented population, or sometimes massively excluded, or discriminated population against. So by not acknowledging that, you risk potentially doing something much worse of what's already been done. And C, obviously, we still need better data management systems. Of course, we need with more investment here, basically, and that has to be done in order to advance AI solutions. So here are some things we recommend as a result of this program. We need general principles. By now, there are like at least 1,000 general principles of saying use AI for good. I mean, Latin America will benefit of either inspiring on those principles or developing its own. But at the end of the day, we need some general principles on how this will work. We need the inclusive adoption of AI by the private sector. I mean, not all private sector is created equally. And so we have a lot of startups in Latin America using this technology. They could add significant value, but they don't have the means sometimes to get the grants with the government. We have a couple of cases here in Empatia that they managed to do that, but it was basically because Empatia was the program, and it wouldn't have succeeded if this was a normal, regularly public procurement process. So that creates an issue in terms of the providers, but also in terms of the private sector is going to use this solution in Latin America. We need more research programs. Most of our researchers here are connected to global North institutions, and for some reason they tend not to cooperate among themselves. And there are some attempts to do that. I mean, it's not a matter of; it's mostly a matter of incentives. We need human talent in the public sector, as we mentioned, or at least for if you want public-oriented use of AI. And that's the reason as well we are collaborating with our colleagues of Open Knowledge. We need legal and technical normatives, so there's a whole missing there. Yes, probably we are going to need better laws to deal with this. I understand the European Union has a large body of normative emerging at this moment. That doesn't mean this applies automatically in Latin America. Just because you regulate first doesn't mean you are right. It's something that people need to be reminded of occasionally. And then data governance mechanisms are also needed. I mean, this goes well beyond open data in a sense that in order to get for instance, support and scale of some of these processes and of some of these tools, I mean, data governance needs to be properly addressed. There is an issue about education, as Renata was mentioning as well, not only about education about AI, but education about rights and digital rights, which is imperative in this context. And there's a cross-cutting issue, which is about diversity and gender inclusion measures. This is something we were quite lucky or quite deliberate, I will say, in getting teams in Empatia to represent, to at least be balanced on gender parity, and most of the teams were balanced in terms of gender parity. But the IT sector, and obviously this is not exception, remains a very male-dominated one. With the consequences this has in terms of the lack of views and the lack of diversity. But diversity also means new profiles and new views, not only technical expert views, or not only savvy entrepreneurs views, but potentially people that are in a multidisciplinary way actually dealing with wicked problems. I mean, the only way these solutions are going to deliver some value in Latin America is if you have the right minds and the right diversity of minds to address the problem. And the tool, which is most of the time a machine learning solution, can potentially help you to deliver that. And I will leave it here. This is what we learned. This is what we recommend, and we're happy to chat about it. Thank you very much.
That's really great, Fabricio. I was going to invite people for a round of virtual applause, and also for Renata that had to go. There are very interesting points. Feel free, anyone in the audience, to point questions, but there's going to be an opportunity to chat about it. There are lots of very relevant things here in terms of inclusion, in terms of indigenous development, and so on. And Silvia, would you like to ask a question right now, or you wait until we finish a presentation, or if it's something on the spot?
No, it was a clap. I mean, yes, I don't question, but I will ask it later. No, sorry. Perfect. Instead of clapping, I raise my hand. Sorry, all day digitally. Sorry, everyone. Thank you, Fabrizio. Great presentation.
No worries. So there are lots of things to follow up, and I do have also other questions to do. Fabricio, in the meantime, if you want, just put the link to the project, because some people may be keen to see. And I think this is a goldmine for lots of, research projects that many of us, have great students and supervised work. And there is a lot to be, unpacked here. So we'll move now to Pablo's presentation that, as Fabricio mentioned, this is part of the Empatia umbrella, and it's very nice that he's going to go very in-depth in one of these cases that is for, an important public good, that is precisely justice. So over to you.
Thank you, Carla. First of all, yes, I wanted to thank the organization and you especially for having us here. And I say us because I'm the privileged one to be presenting today, but basically I'm here because a whole team of people behind this initiative. And also thank you, Fabricio and Hilda, for the support, and Silvana as well. I mean, in order to talk about the application of AI in our criminal court within the judicial branch of the city of Buenos Aires, I cannot elude or disregard the process that got us here in the first place, right? Basically, the foundations of this. So I'll be touching a lot about that, about how we got here, which I think closely relates with the lessons that Fabricio just shared about empathy in general. And mainly it's about the people involved in this journey. And as I said, I was lucky enough to be studying now here in the UK. And I can honestly say that has a lot to do, or everything to do, with the people I had the chance to work for and with, and which were led by Pablo Casas, which is the judge of this criminal court number 10. So I'll get to it. Basically, in my case, I've been working for 12 years in different institutions and sectors within the criminal justice sector more broadly. And in Argentina, the reality is that justice institutions are amongst the ones with the lowest public trust levels, right? And that's not how we really felt about our work. This touches me and personally, and also Pablo Casas, the judge, but also people within the whole team. It seems in Argentina that when you work in the public sector, and specifically in the judiciary, one almost needs to feel ashamed that works there, right? But that's not the reality I've experienced for the last 12 years. I've encountered myself with lots of committed individuals and lots of committed people that really wanted to do justice in a way. So we set ourselves to try to change that, and we started really an introspective journey to see how we could change it, how we could show that there are many valuable people working, and there's many work properly done there. So we said, okay, let's start giving real access to our work, right? And we decided to open a public Twitter account. We know it might not be the best of communications channel, but we realized that since it's a social media, that you don't need to have a user in order to access the publications. We choose this Twitter account, and we open up an open data repository, and we decided to start sharing our work. We started with our judgments, which basically this involves quite a learning curve. We start this at the beginning of 2016, and you're going to be surprised that when we started, we actually print the judgments, and we manually anonymize all the judgments, because we were always aware from the beginning that while putting information sensible as information containing judgments in the public spheres, this collided also with the right to personal protection, right? So we were quite serious about trying to anonymize, and we went through a wider approach. So we anonymize every personal data contained, and also addresses, basically any information that we feel it can't direct to knowing who the people involved are, not just the defendants, but also people involved in terms of victims or witnesses. So then one of the main challenges, as I say, was safeguarding this personal data, and we designed between ourselves this anonymization process, which started by doing it manually, and then went through doing it with a word text, basically, and we set ourselves to do it in a like a two-tier process, where two different people from the court went through the judgments before publication. And another thing we try to do is rotate the team, so not everyone, the same people were doing this consistently, because we found that might be monotonous, and at the end of the day there was too much of a risk. Of course, this took a lot of time, and we were always aware of trying to come up with some sort of automation, but I think this is quite relevant in terms of natural language processing tools. There's for Spanish language, there was always that was always quite a trouble, but doing this manually had some risk in terms of it can be fallible, and as I said, it took too much time. So we decided to organize together with the Magistrate Council of the City of Buenos Aires a hackathon. This was held in December of 2019 at the Universidad de Buenos Aires at the law faculty. And in this hackathon, we got a multiple participation and cross-sector collaboration, as it's a bit tiny, I think, there, but many organizations within academia, public sector, private sector participated from the media, and we decided to get this challenge going about, okay, setting the scenario. This right now we're sharing our information. We've been sharing our information consistently, our judgments, for 4 years, and we're doing it manually. So we want to develop a tool, and the challenge will be that if any team here can through this day develop a prototype. And that's what happened. An organization, a group, basically they're not an organization, group of different programmers and IT specialists got together, which were mainly formed by people from the Comeback cooperative. designing an algorithm that could process documents and anonymize some of the data on the judgments, like identified certain and do some name recognition. So then this went through a personal like supervision by a person. So that that prototype then eventually led us to the AI2 project. There's on the, it says IA because IA is in Spanish, logically. And this derived on this project, that one of the things that we've been doing, and that's why I was mentioning before that this is a lot about not just the people within the court, but the general people around the court number 10. And what do I say people around court number 10? Because organizations such as ILDA or Democracia en Red, or many people that were learning about what we were trying to do within the judiciary, always were keen to support. And we ourselves, like in my case, I was always trying to look for places where we could look for support. And we needed to scale this prototype that really blew our minds in this hackathon. When we got this prototype, we say, okay, now we need to make it a reality, and in some way, to be honest, like, okay, let's end the manual anonymization at once, and let's get this thing going automatically. So I came across the Empatia project of ILDA on the web, and I remember telling Pablo, like, we should tell Canva to apply and to go through this process. And as I was reading the guidelines of the project, I was saying, like, this falls right into place, right? As we say in Argentina, como anillo al dedo, like a ring to a finger. It touches every element of our initiative. So Canva went through the process, and they were selected, luckily, and that opened a whole other element of multi-stakeholder participation, because after getting selected through the first part of the process, Canva kept developing and worked together with us to develop the anonymization tool, which we're currently using nowadays. But since they were limited in terms of resources at one point, they decided to reach to other cooperatives working in technology on Argentina and in Latin America, and they got other cooperatives involved, and we got also, of course, as Fabricio mentioned, the Empatia project was funded by the IDB and the ERC. And from the part of the cooperatives, Canva joined FACTIC, which is like a federation of different technology cooperatives. And what does this mean, cooperatives, is that they have horizontal governance models, not vertical. And within those cooperatives, there was specifically one, which was ALT, which means Alternativa Laboral Trans, which is formed by trans people, and they were in charge in part of the development of the tool, specifically in the name entity recognition design. So this, I see how Renata shared the Rome principles from UNESCO, and I think I used to have them in a previous presentation, and I don't know why they're not here, but they fall right into place. But this is a clear case of AI applied to the public sector, but with collaboration with people from civil society, with collaborations from academia, and the tool. One of the most, for me, like, robust things about this project is that the system security and data, it's an audible software because it's open source. and it's available. And this, of course, the tool itself, it has a scalability for me which can be massive, right? And it can really generate a milestone in terms of getting access to information flowing within Latin America, not just in the judiciary, but in other places as well. But of course, as Fabricio rightly mentioned, one of the biggest issues about this is also the data itself, right? What data are we feeding to this mechanism? So we worked quite a lot in the structure of our judgments. We already had this data mindset from the beginning of our initiative. We were always again, going to what Renata was saying, she spoke about capacities and how we try to look for those people within the public sector that gets the things or have the critical thinking, and we humbly try to do that. So we had our judgment structured. So I'll go real quick with the specifications of the tool, but how it works, we feed the algorithm, the judgment. The judgment is read by the algorithm. It detects different entities, and it comes with a entity recognition where it says, okay, this is a name, this is an address, this is a identification number, and that is supervised by one of the people at the court, and it corrects any name entity that has come wrong. So then the thing, okay, I'm in 15 minutes now, but can I stretch a bit further? Carla, is that okay? Okay, so then it has this supervised control, which I believe it's also an asset of this tool, and specifically in these first stages. And something that used to take us like 45-50 minutes, now it's taking us 3 minutes. So you can imagine how well was received in the team of port number 10. We've been trying to get our data structures and our data initiative relentlessly and with a lot of dedication as right as we could. So this element of helping in our everyday work was a massive milestone for us. And the algorithm with the training, it gets better every time. So that's also quite an asset of this tool, which I think it's an example of harnessing AI for social good, right? Encouraging data protection within the public sector and trying to tackle this balance between data protection and access to information. And it's a people-centered innovation as well, I believe. And as I mentioned before, I think it's really one of the potential of this tool is scalability, and hopefully, well, I'm quite convinced. We always speak about this with people within our team. I think that down the line, open justice policies are going to be seen like people are going to say, what wasn't every information within the judiciary available at all times? Like, I don't know if I'm going to live to see it, but I'm convinced that eventually that's where we're going. And I think this tool has a power and the potential to at least pave that road to there. So basically, that's a whole story of this tool, and I'm happy to answer any questions I could have or anyone could have.
Thank you so much. Another round of virtual applause to you. I think this is just part of the story you tell us here. It's an amazing project, and it was really, well told in the sense of, well, the complexity of this process and all the context that it involves. So I would like now to invite everyone for a conversation. There are lots of things to, I think, So for that, I'm going to stop recording so everyone can feel very, relaxed to jump into the conversation.
Recording stopped.
So, are there any quick reactions or questions from the audience? Please, put your hand up, and I'm just trying to move this, but like Sylvia, I can see your hand.